So this is a Falken Wildpeak AT4w, brand new tire. I think a lot of people thought that this was going to be a redesign of the AT3w, which was a wildly successful tire. And it's not that at all. This is a completely new tire. It doesn't even smell the same. They redesigned this from the ground up, and that may make it the most surprising new tire of 2024. If you're new to the channel, welcome to Outdoor Auto. My name is Nathan Mueller. We have already tested and reviewed a huge variety of the top AT tires, including all of these in this list and more. Our AT tire comparisons are some of the top rated reviews out there for being honest and unbiased. So definitely check those out if you haven't seen them yet. So I'm gonna walk you guys through the changes that Falken made from the AT3 to the AT4w. We're gonna talk about how that's going to affect its performance, what definitely got better, and also something that definitely got worse. So Falken is doing some pretty interesting things in the off-road tire space. When they introduced the AT3w, they kind of took the industry by storm, and it really did really well. It surprised a lot of people. And then, now they're following it up with the AT4w. After the AT3, it doesn't even seem like has been out that long. So they're doing a lot to steal market share right now from their competitors, and they're definitely a worthy adversary. If you don't know a lot about them, that kind of makes sense. A lot of tire companies have been around for what seems like 100 years, if not more. And then you have Falken. Falken only started in 1983. They're a Japanese tire company. They're owned by Sumitomo Tire Industries, I believe is what it's called. And their manufacturing right now is currently in Japan, in Thailand, and in Buffalo, New York. Now, I don't believe these are made in Buffalo, New York. If you check them, as far as all the ones that I've seen so far, they seem to all be made in the Thai factory. Let's go ahead and jump into the tire, and we'll start out with the tread. There's something really interesting that they did where they tried to give us tread that kind of looks like the old tread in the middle, but it's actually not. It's completely different. Let me show you what I mean. All right, we're gonna jump into here and we're gonna look at this. The old AT3 tire had what they called a pattern of C's and Z's. So you have the S pattern that's super popular in almost everything right now. They even have this S pattern in the new KO3s. If you haven't seen the review I just did on the brand new KO3, definitely check it out. But you've got the S pattern as the middle. That's very similar to what they had in the past. Then you have these guys, which were called the Z's, and then you have these, which were called the C's. Now the interesting thing is, these grooves, when you have these type of grooves in tires and they're full depth, they go all the way down to the bottom and they cut in a ways. This gives you additional biting edges and traction when you're off-roading, basically. Well, on the Z's, this groove right here used to be full depth, and it still is full depth, but it's angled out severely. So it's shallower than it used to be. And then they gave you a new groove here, but that one is quite literally superficial. Like after 10,000 miles, that groove's not even going to exist anymore. So I'm pretty sure that's just a warranty marker to where after you hit that, you can't exchange the tire anymore. So it doesn't really have a lot to do with anything. When you move down to the C tread, that's where it gets even more interesting. This used to be a C, and then this groove cut in a little bit deeper and was full depth. And now it's not. See that very, very clear shelf there? It's reinforced. And what you're gonna find when you look at this tire is they sacrificed a few things to give us a much stronger tire. So just remember, it's always about pros and cons with all-terrain tires. You could complain and say, oh, I have less biting edges. This tire's not gonna be nearly as good at traction. Well, that might be true, but when I say not nearly, we're talking about very small nuances. There's a lot of other stuff that they did to this tire. But at the same time, they did a lot of things to make this tire stronger. So the way that these step down and are still there, it's a reinforced lug. It makes this whole entire lug stronger. The way these angle out now, instead of just go straight down, this is a stronger lug. So they're giving a stronger construction to the tire. Okay, so now let's jump to the outside lugs. Remember, the old outside lug looked like this. It was repetition of a similarly sized lug. The only difference really was the end. You had the Canyon sipes. We'll talk about sipes in a minute. But each lug, see how it bumped out and then sucked in? You'd call it like a scalloped edge, but it's not truly scalloped, because scalloped means this one would go totally out and then this one would go in. That's like the KO2 design or KO3 design for shoveling mud. So this is cool that it gives you some grip, but it doesn't give you near as much grip as the alternating lug. Well, look at the new tire. The new tire, the entire lug is out and then in, and then out and then in. So they're giving you that scalloped outer design to give this thing paddles to try to help it out in the mud. All all-terrain tires are not great in the mud because the gaps are a little bit, too close together to toss mud out very freely. But they're trying to do as good as they can do in mud. And this design right here with these alternating lugs is a huge improvement for mud. So this is gonna do better in mud than the old tire. Now, another thing that you're gonna notice is these outside lugs are massive. When you look at them compared to the old ones, the old ones were all thin, and it was just thin in a whole bunch of them, right? And then they moved to these much bigger, beefier lugs on the outside. And what you're gonna notice with that is these lugs don't flop around as much. So it used to be that when you would drive fast on this and you would turn, where you end up on a corner or on a corner, you'd have like a little bit of almost like a floating sensation where these lugs would be very bendy because this tire was made out of a very soft compound, the AT3 was. So it would float. You could feel the movement of the rubber and it didn't feel sturdy. Well, now they gave us all of the lugs are reinforced compared to the old ones. The outer lugs are much bigger. On top of that, we'll talk about compound as well, but this is a harder compound. It's still not super hard, but it's harder than the compound that they used in AT3. So we have much more solid outer lugs and much larger outer lugs. That means that your steering the feel of the steering is going to be much more precise and much more accurate. Another thing that you're gonna notice is if you start measuring the size of these lugs as you step through, you're gonna start noticing that they alternate in sizes drastically. I'm not talking from this one to this one. I'm talking like even the ones that look the same. When you measure them, they're different sizes. And that's because they're doing pitch sequencing. So when the air is hitting your tire and hitting these gaps, it's gonna resonate a certain way. And they're spacing these and making them a different size to where it creates noise that actually cancels itself out. So that's called pitch sequencing. This is definitely a pitch sequence tire. When you look at the gaps and you measure it, they're doing really smart things there to try to make it a quieter tire, because it was definitely always a fairly loud tire, and that's because this tread on this is one of the deepest treads out there. And one of the reasons that it's the deepest tread out there is because it has a high mileage warranty. Now think about this, the AT3 had a 55,000 mile warranty on the light truck tires. This one has a 60K, and it has the exact same tread depth. So in order to get that extra 5K, they had to get us more rubber to drive on, bigger lugs, and they gave us a little bit harder compound. But it's still a very silica-rich compound, so it shouldn't be freezing when it gets into the cold weather, where it freezes and then you just lose all your traction for snow. I don't think it's gonna do that because these guys kind of, I don't wanna say they led the way, but they definitely went after the high silica compounds that don't freeze in the cold weather. Okay, so when it comes to siping, there are only a couple changes, but the changes are actually pretty important and surprising. So check this out. Let's go ahead and look at the tire. First off, you're gonna notice on the outside lugs, they used to have what they called like 3D canyon grooves, where these were like zigzag lines. So basically it looked like that, okay? And if you notice, this lug, it's contained within the lug. On this lug, it goes all the way to the edge. So a lot of people don't pay attention to siping. Siping is where you get really nerdy in tires, but this serves a different purpose than that. So if you look at the new tire, all of it is within the lug. Nothing goes to the sides. So when you have a sipe like this that goes and channels to the side, this is made to grip on ice and packed snow. And then also when you're driving on water, it will actually channel water into this channel, right? If there's water getting compressed on this lug that's making it not grip, it's gonna get sucked into this channel and spit out here. Same thing here. And then they have this long channel, and remember, only a section of your tire is on the road at any time. So this channel right here is shooting water forward and backwards. It's purging all the water, so this thing has excellent grip on a wet road. Well, when you look at the side lugs, they no longer have the zigzags. Well, the reason that they had the zigzags is these lugs were much smaller lugs. So those zigzags were so when it compressed, it'd grip against each other and it would strengthen this lug. Well, that lug was so small, it needed to be strengthened. Well, we've got bigger lugs now that are reinforced, and they got rid of the zigzags. Now the zigzags also help in the grip in the snow and ice. And I'm not talking powder, I'm talking like packed snow and icy roads. So now we have these straight ones. They still are good for gripping on snow and ice. But one thing to remember, this is one of those things people are gonna argue with me in the comments. There's two things that everyone doesn't believe with tires that are definitely true. When you are driving on snow, like packed snow or ice, you actually want these grooves to fill with snow, because packed snow in this groove will stick to snow on the road better than your hard tire will. So on an icy, snowy road, you want this to collect snow. It will grip better that way. These grooves will grab on ice. You think ice is perfectly flat, it's not. So these little sipes can grab on that, and they do a great job on that. So that's where a lot of your traction comes in really bad driving conditions, is from these sipes and from these grooves collecting snow. The AT3 just instantly got known as one of the best tires in snow. And when I say snow, we're not talking powder, I'm talking compressed snow or ice and wet roads. And they sacrificed a tiny bit of that performance, which is literally what they became known for. They sacrificed a little of that performance to make us a stronger tire. So these other outer lugs that were so good on a wet road and so good at siphoning water and suction cupping and siphoning water, all the things that the science they put into there, they sacrificed it a tiny bit. Now, is this going to be drastically worse on a wet road? No. It's still going to be a great tire on a wet road. It's really good, and a lot of that's going to have to do with the compound. It's not just the siping that does that, but it's going to perform a tiny bit less on wet roads and on ice. These are 3D sipes. So if you pry these sipes apart and you look inside of them, they actually do bracing that goes from this side of the sipe to that side of the sipe. There's like connective tissue inside of there, and that connective tissue keeps this sipe open. So even as it's compressed down under the weight of the vehicle, it can, like these ones, can suck in the water and squish it out. Okay, let's talk compound, and you're gonna notice a theme. So let's jump right into it. When you look at the tire, you're obviously can't notice that much about compound, but when you start going in and squeezing the lugs and you try to make it compress on these little sipes, you're just gonna notice this is a significantly tougher compound than before. So it's not as soft as it used to be. Again, I have to be careful saying that though, because then when I say it's not soft, people think it's rock hard and it's just gonna be slipping all over the road. it's not a hard compound, it's just harder than it was, which makes sense because we didn't get any deeper tread and yet we get an additional 5,000 miles out of this thing. So they had to make it a little bit harder, but the bigger deal there is making the harder tread just makes the lugs, it's a different way of reinforcing them without, they already reinforced them by making them bigger. Now they reinforce them by giving them a tougher compound. Okay, we're to our final category, and then we'll just do the quick summary. Sidewalls. The sidewalls on these have changed a ton. Check this out. This is actually pretty crazy. So we spin this around over here. Let's go ahead and get this other camera up. First of all, like even just the name, like sure, it used to bump out, but now it bumps out a lot. Then check out, they totally re-engineered the side biters on this. They extend farther down, and these things are huge. It's really hard to use a camera to give perspective on this, but they changed the design of how they looked. Remember, they looked just like this before, which is a similar shape, but there wasn't a lot of detail on them. Now they have a lot more angling, they have a lot more of these grooves. I don't know if these grooves, I believe these are to help distribute heat to the outside of the tire. Just gives it more surface area to move heat from here and work its way out. I believe that's what it is. It's also interesting how it has this seam that runs around. I don't know if that was a style choice. I can't really exactly figure out what else purpose it serves. But then, like I said, these have just been beefed up. These are way bigger. This design that they have on here almost looks like it was stolen directly from, ignore all these tires, but it's really similar to the design that you actually see on the Baja Bosses. They alternate the sizes of them, but it's really similar to the Mickey Thompson Baja Bosses. The Baja Bosses definitely stick out a little bit farther, but also that's a 37, and this is basically a 33 equivalent. So definitely a lot more aggressive sidewall. They've always given us this interesting design on the inside, which I've always kind of thought was super fascinating. I was always, is it just for looks or does it serve a purpose? I feel like it does serve a purpose in when sticks and stuff try to come and de-bead your tire. I'm trying to figure out if they're trying to give it something to deflect off of, or if it's really just for looks. But not really any other tire manufacturers, or not that many, are doing this type of thing. So I've always thought that was kind of interesting. But all in all, much more aggressive sidewall. Now, the biggest change that makes this tire finally, in my opinion, a real for real off-road tire is this. They gave us what they're calling it DuraSpec. I hate all the fancy names, like those tires, they call them Duragen sidewalls, but it's still just a weak 2-ply sidewall. I don't care how many Duragens, DuraSpec, Kevlars you tell me, just give me a tire that is actually a 3-ply sidewall. And they did that finally. They gave us a true 3-ply sidewall. And you can notice it, you can feel it. When you grab this tire and look at it compared to the old ones, this is a beefier tire. The other ways that you can feel that though is in the weight. So let's talk weight really quick. So we're talking, this is a 285/70/17. It's the lighter duty. So it's a 116, 113R. What that means is the max PSI in this one's gonna be 50. They make this exact same size tire in the higher numbers, and then the max PSI is 80. So you can go either way, but if you're running a light truck like a Tundra that you're not doing a ton of towing, or a Tacoma, you know, this is a tire that would be very commonly found on that. The thing that's so fascinating about this is they made this so much stronger, but this tire, the old AT3w in this size weighed 60 pounds, 60.6 pounds. In this size, it weighs 67 pounds. So this tire got 7 pounds heavier. So every category we've talked about, whether it's compound, whether it's sidewall, anything. I keep telling you, they're making this thing stronger, stronger, stronger. Well, guess what? That strength comes with a cost, and the cost is weight. This now goes from a 60.6 pound tire to a 67.2 pound tire. Now, to put that into perspective, if you compare this to the exact same size KO3 with the exact same 3-ply sidewall, that tire only weighs 56.6 pounds. So this tire is quite literally more than 10 pounds heavier than an exact same size KO3. Some people would just give up right there. They go, that's too much weight, because rotational weight costs you a lot in miles per gallon, right? And rotational weight, it's going to cost you a lot in miles per gallon, but also in power in your car. If you don't have if you got a Tundra with a V8, you probably don't care. If you're driving a big heavy duty truck that you do towing in, you probably don't care. If you're driving an older series Tacoma with an underpowered engine, you're going to notice the difference with this tire versus like a KO2 or a KO3. But they did give us a much beefier tire. What did they do to this and why? So let's first of all cover what it got better at, right? It's going to be better in powder. I've got my notes right here. I have to take notes on this stuff to actually hit all the points. It got better in powdery snow, because in powdery snow, these paddles on the side and the alternating lugs that stick out, much better in powdery snow. They gave us improved dry traction because we have bigger lugs and we have more rubber on the road at all times. So your dry traction is going to be improved. There's going to be a lot less float on your cornering because they gave us stronger, strengthened, and larger lugs. They're going to give us, it's a noisy tire because it still has super deep tread, but it's a less noisy tire. They did a lot of work on the pitch sequencing. The old one, I believe, was pitch sequenced as well, but I believe they've done a lot of work to actually quiet this tire down. And then they've improved the sidewall lugs, which again is going to help us in the mud, and it's also going to help us in powdery snow, right? So they've done a lot to improve this tire. Now, where we lost some is we lost some traction on wet roads and icy roads. That doesn't mean it's terrible at it now. It was quite literally almost leading the pack in that, as far as aggressive AT tires. So it's still going to be really good. It's just going to take a tiny step back, which is interesting because that was kind of its identity before, right? There's going to be a little bit less, it's going to be a little bit less comfortable of a tire to drive on like Subarus and light trucks. We were used to the squishier rubber absorbing a lot more of the road vibrations. Now it's got a harder compound, it's got bigger lugs. So while you're going to be able to turn confidently, you're going to notice more bumps. So it's going to be, in my opinion, it's a little bit less comfortable tire than it used to be, but I'm okay with that because what you're getting in return for that is on a lot of the correct, like certain sizes that you're buying for off-roading, you're now getting a 3-ply sidewall. 3-ply sidewall is always going to make a less comfortable ride, but it's a much stronger tire. You're definitely going to get lower miles per gallon because it weighs a lot more. That's just a fact of life. The other last thing is they used to have this thing called step technology where the edges of the lugs would step down, and that was their version of like rock ejection for getting rocks to not get stuck in here. This tire basically has no rock ejection now. The big question, when you look at all of that as a whole, you go, what is Falken doing? Okay, they took the wet road leader and made it less of a wet road. Why would they do this? Because I got to emphasize when I say that, it's not a worse tire. It's just a different tire. It's a completely different tire. They did this because the biggest market for truck tires in America is for big trucks. It's your Ford F-150s and bigger work trucks where they have fleets of trucks that go to job sites. And the Falken was simply too squishy of a tire to be able to go after that market in the past. So they've reintroduced it, they've made it a much stronger tire, but then while doing that, they've also introduced heavy duty sizes, not sizes, but weights. So they have HD tires that they didn't have before. So now they have ones that can handle towing. They've got ones that will work on 1-ton trucks. They have ones that'll work on a 1-ton truck towing that can still turn and be confident in their turns. They didn't have anything like that before. So they've doubled down to go after the entire truck market, not just the off-road and overland market, but they've also now given us different sizes and different options with HD tires and 3-ply sidewalls to be able to confidently go after those super heavy trucks. Some of you are going to care about this a lot. This just became a really competitive job site tire. And some of you won't care. Some of you are like, nah, I still want the 2-ply light version and I'm gonna stick it on my Subaru. And that's totally fine too. They still make it. The only difference you're probably gonna notice is it might be a little bit quieter and it might not be quite as good as it was on a wet road as it used to be, but it's still gonna be pretty good, and it's gonna be good at a lot of other things. It's gonna be good in mud, it's gonna be good at powdery snow. So this is still an incredibly solid tire. It's just an incredibly different tire than it used to be.